Good evening. You are listening to Radio Free Magonia, the official podcast of the Magonian Research Group. As always, we are your hosts, Michael Parrish and
Tom Goodwin. Hello.
It's good to have you, Tom.
Great to
Tonight,
be back.
yeah. Tonight we are doing what I like to call a house show, in which we do not have a guest per se. Instead, we are joined by one of our own members. Tonight, that happens to be Fernando. Fernando, how are you?
Pretty good. Good to be here.
It's good to hear. Now, as you know, we don't do opening banter. We don't do any of that bullshit here. We get right to it almost as soon as we start. So let's do that. Fernando, you have had some interesting experiences in your day. What's going on with that?
Well, I think I would start with my most distant one I can remember.
Mm-hmm.
And to this day, I don't even remember this even happened. When I think about it, I remember it as like a daydream.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, this was like around like 2007, 2008. I know I was around somewhere in elementary school. I know that for sure. And we were coming back from a field trip to a garden center somewhere outside Minneapolis, here in Minnesota.
Mm-hmm.
And as we were driving by this farm field,
Yeah.
I noticed when looking out the window of the school bus, I saw this glowing like pyramid just sitting in this field. And yeah, like this pyramid just sitting there with like and it was big too. It wasn't something I could just like not notice. Just not notice. It was there and it was big. And one thing I specifically noticed was that it had like at the tip of the pyramid had like this eye.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know, like the Eye of Providence. It looked like that. And yeah, and I noticed that no one else in the bus noticed it. It was just me.
I was going to ask. When you say big, how big was it? Like in comparison to what?
Man, I want to say about like half the size of a man, it's been so long that let's see. I want to say somewhere half around the size of the pyramids in Egypt.
Okay.
Somewhere around there.
And the eye, did you notice anything peculiar about the eye? Was it looking back at you? Did you make eye contact?
I looked at it. It was just stationary, you know.
Okay.
And later on in life, when I was thinking more about it, I was thinking that maybe someone built this thing out there, and no. The closest thing I could find to it was this pyramid that was used for industrial purposes, but that was like somewhere all the way out in like North Dakota.
Did it appear solid, or did it appear like
it looks
hologram or okay?
Yeah, it looks solid, like a solid gold.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to ask what color it was. Were there visible lines from like blocks, or was it just solid?
Yeah, like lines, you know, like lines of blocks.
Okay.
Okay.
And how did you did you tell anyone at the time?
No. And the weirdest thing, like I said, that no one else noticed it. It was just me. I was looking around the school bus to see if anybody else was looking at this. Everyone else was just, you know, talking.
Okay.
Which is why it makes me think of what if this was just a daydream or something.
But I don't think a daydream could have created this, you know, because even children can distinguish pretty easily between what goes on in their minds and what goes on in the outside world.
Yeah.
You know, I wouldn't say this was a daydream.
Yeah.
It could just be that it was so long ago that your memory of it is so faded that retrospectively it's no different than a daydream.
Yeah, and I wonder if it was a daydream, why I still remembered it all these years later.
Did you have any particular emotional reaction to it?
From what I can remember, not really. Just, I want to say like amusement.
Okay.
Just seeing this thing out here.
Now, I have to plead ignorance. I've never heard of anything like this, of phantom buildings or phantom structures. I'm going to have to defer to Tom. Tom, what's your take?
So I have heard of plenty of stories of phantom structures. The disappearing cottage is a classic motif in folklore, but honestly, this reminded me of like pyramid-shaped entities, which have been observed rarely, but like they're not entirely unheard of. So, for example, a multi-pyramid being, for lack of a better word, was encountered in 1965 in the town of Poole in the English county of Dorset. This thing was it was seen twice by 7-year-old Terence Druce and his younger brother Roderick. It basically just it first appeared in the bedroom of these two kids, just kind of hovering, and then it was later seen basically moving out from behind a car, and it was associated with a small flap of UFO sightings involving two families.
Now, Tom.
And, yeah.
Tom, when you first described it, your voice cut out because we're low tech. What shape was it?
So this entity was pyramid shaped.
Okay.
Shaped like a very kind of messy triangle. So like a triangle with like loads of edges and loads of like jutty outy bits.
Irregular.
Almost. Yeah, irregular triangle, and it was multicolored and had almost appeared to have I think I'd describe it as like almost multicolored scales. It's not the same thing. It's not the same thing as you saw, Frederick. But it's the same. But Fernando. But it's the same. It's the same kind of shape of entity and the same kind of general description. Mm-hmm. I've never heard of an entity resembling the Eye of Providence. Or indeed a phantom building resembling the Eye of Providence. I mean, obviously we all know the esoteric symbology behind that, so it's not as like the Eye of God, and so it's not entirely kind of new to the Fortean field, but it's still I've never heard of someone seeing a manifestation of that symbol in real life.
So you, Fernando, you didn't tell anyone afterward?
No, and I don't know why either. I guess it's just, I guess back then I just thought it was a daydream.
Yeah. Well, in hindsight, I can relate because I've noticed that, as a child, you have less discernment. You have less ability to distinguish between what should be there and what shouldn't. Yeah, and so you will accept a lot of things as just part of the natural environment that an adult wouldn't. Like when I was growing up, I used to see shadow figures lurking about our home, and they didn't bother me. They didn't seem out of place. I just accepted that. Well, that's just one of the things that exist in this world. Are these black figures? To me, they were as natural as the squirrels in the backyard. So I'm kind of with you on that. I understand that. What's the next thing you remember?
From that same incident, I mean, I didn't really think about this until years later when I started getting more interest in just anomalous phenomena. I guess the closest thing I could think of could be the Pyramid of North Dakota. But the problem is that this thing is all the way out in like northern North Dakota, and this thing is like hours away from where I live. And and we got back from that field trip the same day we went in the afternoon, so we didn't leave that far from the school.
Okay. Well, what was the next big experience after that you could remember? Not part of this.
The next one would be somewhere around 2011.
Okay.
Because that's when we were still living in our old house.
Mm-hmm.
So this day was when the family on my father's side was coming over to visit,
Mm-hmm.
and they were all inside, and I was outside just myself, and I was playing by the old pine tree we had, and when I got up from that little area I was in, I saw in the sky what looked to be like a for lack of a better term, a pterosaur.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'd say that because not only because I saw the crest, the pterodon crest that they had,
Mm-hmm.
that, and it's in a I want to say not a super long tail, but it had a noticeable tail.
Okay. So
And
a cryptid.
yeah,
You know.
and the thing I remember most of it is the color. It was like a swampish light green
Okay.
with a like these like yellowish orange spots over its body.
And what was it doing?
It was just flying by. It didn't really do anything, special. Just flying by.
Did it seem to notice you?
No, and it was pretty high up too. It wasn't, too close to me.
Basically, like airplane high, like it
Yeah.
wouldn't have noticed you
No.
even if it. Yeah. Okay.
No.
Yeah, I've seen flying creatures before. I saw one back in like shit 2013, back while the Chicago Mothman stuff was going on.
Hmm.
And like the physical appearance of the creature was totally different from what you saw, but the experience itself was generally the same. It just happened to be there. We just happened to see it. It just happened to be high up, and it just went about its way without noticing us, which is probably for the best. But no, I have to admit I'm not too familiar with like modern dinosaur sightings or flying creature sightings in general, like the lore behind it. I don't know that many individual cases. I don't know that much of the research. So again, I'm going to have to defer to Tom.
Okay, so something interesting which I often see in a lot of modern pterosaur cases are that they seem to describe a creature which is not known from the fossil record. As in the head crest you're describing would normally be characteristic of a pterosaur of the suborder Pterodactyloidea.
Hmm.
Though the long tail is typical of rhamphorhynchoids, so pterodactyloids went extinct with the rest of the large Mesozoic reptiles. So the general dinosaur, what people would think of typically as dinosaurs, whereas rhamphorhynchoids went extinct in the late Jurassic. So that is millions and millions of years separate. And so the description of a pterosaur with a crest on the back of its head and then a long tail. So did you say the tail was very long?
No, I wouldn't say no, I wouldn't say very long. It was noticeable though.
It was noticeable. Yeah. Okay. Did it have like a little? Could you describe the tail anymore? Did you see like a kind of arrow or dart shape?
No, not an arrow. Just just a tail. Nothing like too out of the ordinary.
Oh, okay. Yeah. And so I think that it's very interesting to me how a lot of modern pterosaur sightings, I'd say the vast majority of them represent animals not known from the fossil record. And so it's not like it's almost as if we're seeing a kind of cultural image of a prehistoric survivor as opposed to an actual prehistoric survivor.
Mm-hmm.
Or it could be a phenomenal construct based on our pop culture fueled perception of pterosaurs, which would explain its absence from the fossil record. I don't think these are ghosts of like things that actually existed.
Yeah, I agree.
Or they could be actual survivors of some minor species that's not the fossil record is ignorant of.
Yeah. Fossil record is very very much incomplete, and so it is. I suppose it is possible that there were some groups of large. How big would you say this thing was?
I would say I would say like 7 feet long. I want to say.
So 7 foot wingspan or 7 foot body?
I want to say wingspan. Yeah, I'm not very good at measurements.
I, I seem to remember that the classic pteranodon with the crest size that you're with the crest that you're describing um, would have would have been larger than that, I believe, but I could well be wrong. But yeah, that's So 7 foot wingspan. That's kind of, I'd say, in the middle for modern pterosaur sightings. Some of them are much larger than that. Some of them are.
It wasn't. Yeah, it wasn't big. That's one thing I remember. It wasn't big.
And what was your psychological reaction to it?
Well, the first thing my thought was, oh, it's a pterosaur.
Mm-hmm.
And as a kid, I liked dinosaurs, so I was like, oh, look, it's a pterosaur. And 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 after that, I was like, oh, I need to tell the people inside to come outside and look. And I went inside to tell them, and of course, they didn't believe me because they were busy talking, and I think they just didn't really believe me. They just thought it was like a bird or something. And when I went back outside, it was already gone. So
yeah, I have to comment there. I hate that when adults, especially parents, do not believe their children when their children tell them they're seeing these things. Because usually, that comes from an attitude of like what I call base skepticism, mindless skepticism. Oh, it's just your imagination, or it's just the wind, or it's just this, or it's just that. And, in your case, it was kind of okay. But if the child is experiencing darker things, like things that are targeting him, things that are upsetting him, then you owe it to your child to address that. That nothing good can come from just dismissing it. That really is damaging, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, what's your next experience after that?
Well, this next one is honestly probably my most skeptical on because
Mm-hmm.
to this day I still think it's something pretty normal. So this is about 2013.
Mm-hmm.
This was our last year at the current house, and it was late at night on a summer night. I would say it's like 8 o'clock, and I went to go take out the trash, and when I was just going down the little walkway we had, I saw this like at the time I called it like a wombat
Mm-hmm.
because that's what I thought it looked like. I saw this like wombat go into my garage because the door was open, and yeah, I just went in, and I was at that time I was terrified because the garbage can was all the way at the end of the garage, so I still had to go and throw it. So
Yeah.
I quickly went to do that. I threw a rock inside the garage, see if I could try and scare it out, and I went inside to look out the window and see if it would ever come out, and it never did.
And you're skeptical of that because you think it was probably just a wombat?
No, no. Well, this is Minnesota, so we don't have wombats. So
Oh.
yeah. I mean, you never know, but to this day, I think it was just like a bear cub maybe that
Mm-hmm.
somehow made its way into the suburbs.
Okay. Yeah, I would be skeptical of that myself.
Yeah,
I don't think you ran afoul of anything unusual there.
yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm in agreement.
Yeah. So that is it for my experiences, but the rest are for for my family. And the thing about them is that they're pretty vague. They never really like to talk about these things.
Yeah, but that's fair, you know.
Yeah,
Not
yeah,
everyone.
yeah, because they grew up in a village in Mexico,
Hmm.
and they're live in a pretty rural area, so they're more spiritual and religious with all that. So I try not to bring it up too much around them. But the first experience would be my mom's,
Hmm.
and she brought this up a long time ago, and I remember this when we were watching a documentary on National Geographic about extraterrestrials.
Hmm.
Yeah, and when we were watching it, she brought up that when she was younger in her village, that she went out to use the outhouse, because at that point they were still had outside plumbing. So when she went out, she saw this like this shape, like this circular shape. And again, she's been pretty vague about it, so I'm not entirely sure what she saw, but the shape that had this like that had this like blue light just pointing down right at her.
Hmm.
Like she was like just covered in this blue light. And she said that this lasted about like um 2 minutes before it just flew out, just vanished and flew out into the distance. And so that's what made her remember that when we were watching that documentary.
Now, when you say shape, you mean shape of a craft,
Yeah.
not the shape of an entity. I'm growing kind of sick of that term. Did she ever said anything about the aftermath of that? Any possible medical symptoms she displayed afterward?
Um, no, none that I know of, at least. I mean, she had health problems later in life, but that was, I know what those were from. So, um, no, she never really brought it up after that.
Yeah, see that to me, that's one of those stories, and there are tons of these in the annals where there's like no obvious reason or motivation or point to what happened. It just kind of did.
Yeah.
You know, Tom, could you elaborate?
I would argue almost that these sorts of I think the reason that these sorts of events happen is almost for the express purpose of generating stories.
Myth
So
making.
yeah, myth making, and it's like there's no obvious purpose. There's no objective that an advanced extraterrestrial civilization could get out of that. Just randomly floating over an Earth woman and just shining a little beam down onto her and then leaving.
Hmm.
It's just like it doesn't add up unless we. I mean, it seems like why would you fly light years to get here to just do that? And it's like the same questions can be asked of why they're stealing our crops and all of this. And it's like, A, they've always stolen our crops, and B, they're myth making. They're making stories. They're making these. They're they're keeping these cultural archetypes alive that they almost that almost. I would argue that to some extent they need these archetypes to be able to give them something to manifest as, basically.
Now, you know, I could offer an alternate theory. I don't necessarily believe this, but it's arguable that whatever this thing was doing was scanning her mind, scanning
Yeah.
physically for some reason, and that does not mean that it was necessarily extraterrestrial in the ETH sense.
Hmm.
You know, or whatever. Fernando, I'm sorry, we just don't we don't know that much about all of these things. We don't have all the answers. It's all
Hmm.
just speculation.
I
What?
mean, yeah. I mean, I'm not really looking for answers, really. I mean, I just haven't really shared these stories with anybody since I've never really had anybody to really, sit down and talk about it.
Mm-hmm. So what are some of your family's other experiences?
Um, Well, one thing they do like to bring up is the little people, or the duendes, which are pretty common, or at least pretty commonly seen down in Mexico and parts of, South America. And particularly my uncle on my mom's side, and my aunt too, who like to bring up just various times they've seen like the little people running around at night around their village, usually around where like the animals are, and hiding in the in their crops.
And what do they look like specifically, just beyond just being little people?
Well, they describe them as like having like, they look like villagers, like having like almost like tattered clothing,
Mm-hmm.
like, yeah, peasants, and just causing mischief. Like one time, my aunt said that she saw them just messing around with the cows and just making them like just like startled. But they never really wanted to approach them because I guess they just didn't want to know what would happen if they did.
Okay, but they looked like humans, otherwise just smaller.
Yeah.
Okay, Tom, this one's all yours.
The
We're
duendes.
much in territory here.
We are. The duendes are something which I've looked into along with other little folk from across the world, and yeah, the thing about them messing with the cattle really rings true to me, as in like it's very it's a classic behavior for these sorts of entities. Like all the kind of more modernized manifestations of these same little people and trickster being archetypes. So I would point to the poltergeist and the extraterrestrial. Both of those also really enjoy messing with the livestock. Obviously the case of Skinwalker Ranch comes to mind, with the cows being teleported around. And Ripperstone Farm as well. Which wait, is that the name of the place? I don't know. There's a farm in Wales in which phenomena very much like Skinwalker Ranch took place. I don't think I've got the name right, but never mind. And so like the teleportation of cows, the braiding of horses' manes. It's something which appears in fairy lore in Britain and Ireland, and it's something which appears in little folklore in the Americas.
A variation of it, to my understanding, appears everywhere.
Agreed.
The basic outline is always the same. It's just the details, the specifics change. But it's interesting that, in the modern era, we have both, quote unquote extraterrestrial sightings and a Fae or Fae variation sightings at the same time in different places.
I mean, I was going to say something like it's almost as if it's based on like kind of cultural expectation, but like I don't think so actually, because there are cases in which people who aren't kind of conditioned to perceive these things as fairies, seeing them as fairies, like the elves in Oregon, like the elves in Oregon case, which I talked about on one of the witness interviews we've done previously. And so it does almost seem as if these two entities, which are clearly using the same archetype, as in they're clearly just basically, like, to use a video game style term, they're just reskinnings of the same thing. But for some reason they're still around, which is odd.
Yeah. So, in addition to them, Fernando, what else have they discussed?
Well, the next one would be, this would be around, let's see, we moved somewhere in late 2014, so this would be somewhere around late 2013, early 2014. So at that point, we were already moved out of the house, and the only person left in that house was my uncle, who was living in the basement at the time. And when he eventually did move out and with us again to the new house, he said that when he was just by himself, he would hear footsteps upstairs late at night when there's no one should be up there because all the doors were locked with those special locks that real estate agents use to lock up the houses.
Yeah.
Yeah, the ones you need like a separate key to open a numbered keypad, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And he said that there's some people up there, like it would be like one we walking slowly while the other one would be like we're running around. And we went back the next day with me and my dad to check it out to see someone broke in, and it was fine. All the windows were locked, the doors were closed, and there's nothing that really looked out of the ordinary the day before we went there. So I'm not entirely sure what was going on that night.
Okay, so phantom footsteps.
Yeah.
You could call
and the weirdest thing is that we never experienced anything inside that house. It was always just nothing out of the ordinary. Yeah, like a one-off.
Yeah, phantom footsteps are a common motif. My grandmother experienced them. I have a cousin who experienced them. They're almost stock. They're almost cliche. And I have, kind of like the sound of an infant crying. I don't know why, but it's the same way with that. And personally, I've never got the point of the phantom footsteps. Because it's like, you could argue that these are the sounds of human spirits. Okay, that's plausible. But why, why just footsteps? Could it be,
Mm-hmm.
Could this have been, like a replaying, like a psychic imprint of a situation in which, say, one person was running from another person and the other person was moving much slower, or I don't get it. So again, I'm going to defer to Tom.
Yeah, I mean, okay, so if we're again, there's like two avenues I could go down with this. One of which being the spirits of the dead, and the other being like entities pretending to be the spirits of the dead. And because this is like a Keel-inspired podcast, I'm going to discuss the entities pretending to be spirits first. I know that I keep using the term entity, and I'm very sorry you're sick of that, Michael. Yeah, so obviously the primary purpose of such a thing would probably be like intimidation, almost.
Mm-hmm.
Like intimidation, but not as in like kind of go away intimidation, more just like a feel uncomfortable.
But are they really pretending to be spirits of the dead? If the only effect they're generating is footsteps, if they're not appearing visually?
Yeah, I know. I'm just saying. It's like. Sorry, continue.
It could be a failed attempt at imitating live invaders. It's simulating the sound of a break-in.
That's interesting. I think that the reason why I said it was the spirits, the kind of ghost thing it would be potentially imitating, is just because of how common like the phantom footsteps and like the footsteps up the creaking stairs and all of that are in like old ghost stories, and it's like unless it's a modern update of that, which just does exactly the same thing but is like meant to be a different thing, which is at that point just splitting hairs.
I think we can interpret them as pretending to be the spirits of the dead because that's how most people are going to interpret it anyway. That's the first thing their mind's going to go to.
Yeah. But I do like the psychic imprint theory with that, because I think that like I'm obviously, as you can tell, I'm very much decided that UFOs are not extraterrestrial, but with some ghost stories, with some ghost encounters at least, I do, for some reason, I do still have a little hint of belief that perhaps, or hint of kind of almost wanting to believe that perhaps they could be the spirits of the dead.
So do I. And I'll tell you why is because I think in the unique cases where the entity's appearance, there's that word again, where the apparition's appearance matches that of a known past inhabitant of the place, I think those could be spirits of the dead.
Yeah.
But the generic ones, like the woman in white, or the bag lady is another one, or just like a generic dude, at any old place, like that to me, that could very easily be an imitator, a UT imitator,
a spirit mimic.
Yeah, and it's also interesting to note that those might not their intention might not necessarily be to be perceived as ghosts. That could just be our interpretation. It could be a premature attempt at some other form, at some other ploy, that we don't really understand yet.
Yeah, potentially like trying to, if it is just some random human being looking thing, then it could be like a kind of premature version of a kind of Man in Black, Phantom Stranger type entity.
Yeah, and that could be, what we could be seeing there, like the prototypes of future Men in Black, future Flannel Men, future etc.
Yeah.
Anyway, Fernando, this is your show, and we've kind of like taken it away from you. I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm.
What else? What else do you have for your family's experiences?
Well, for this last one, I'd say it's not family, but a close friend. But this is a more recent one. This is from I'm gonna say about 2018, and I wasn't with them, and I really wish I was, because then I would have had proof of this. But he told me that when he and my other friend Ben were out driving, they were down in Iowa in the more like rural parts where the farms are and the and the fields are. He said that when they were driving back up to the cities, they said that as they were driving through, they saw this like this wolf just come out of the field and just walk real slowly across the road, just looking straight at them looking straight at the car. And he said that this thing was big. Like this thing was like you could see this thing over the hood.
Okay, that's not a wolf.
Yeah. Yeah, and yeah, it was big. That's why he kept repeating. It was big. And
he called you frantically, or
no, this was the next day.
Okay.
And I was with him, and yeah, it just he was weirded out. They were just walking by real slowly, just looking at him.
Well, how did this scenario end? Did it disappear into the air? Did it move on?
Yeah, it just moved on. It was like it just walked real slowly past him, just looking at him the whole time, until it just walked right back into the field across the road. And he told me that they sat there for like a good good 5 minutes, just trying to figure out what just happened, because usually where we are, we usually have coyotes. So when you usually encounter them, they just like run past you, whether if it's just you or in a car. But yeah, they were just weirded out how it just like it was like it was sizing them up.
Now, did they have any follow-up experiences to that? Did any of them experience anything strange in their homes or in public after that? The weeks that followed?
No, nothing that they told me about. I would assume no. And I told them one thing I told them was that did they take any pictures, and they said no. And I told them and I said oh well, why not? Because I know they had phones. And they just said they were just so focused on just watching this big, I'm gonna say wolf just walking past slowly, just sizing them up.
Mm-hmm. Like they were entranced.
Yeah.
Did they mention anything about the eyes?
The nothing particular. They said that they were glowing, but this was at night,
Yeah.
so
And potentially, obviously,
Yeah.
car headlights and eye shine.
Yeah, yeah. There are reports of animal-like figures with glowing eyes
Yeah.
that are genuinely anomalous, like eyes glowing during the daytime or glowing in, forests with a lot of sky coverage, a lot of like branch and brush coverage. But if it happens out in the road, generally that's probably just reflections from the headlights or it's just natural eye shine. But that still doesn't explain the anomalous size of this thing.
Yeah, I mean, like black dogs and phantom hounds and all those sorts of creatures in folklore are often described as being like the size of cows.
Mm-hmm.
And but yeah, I almost get the feeling from the description that this thing was even bigger.
Mm-hmm.
But it was. You see, now I'm trying to visualize it. It's like
Yeah.
exceptionally large for a wolf, and yet was everything proportionate or proportional still? Like limb, tail, etc. The same. It's just like normal shaped wolf, just larger size.
Yeah, I mean, he said that, yeah, it looked like a wolf, but it looked a little like it's around its shoulders. It looked like almost hunched. It had like a lot of fur in that area around its shoulders, or like its front legs.
What color was its fur? If he told you.
He told me it was like a mix of like a darkish gray and black.
Well, that's pretty standard.
Yeah.
Tom, once again, I'm almost illiterate when it comes to anomalous canine lore. If you could fill us in here.
It reminds me of the so there's this creature from the folklore, from the indigenous folklore of the Canadian North, which is obviously like reported all across like in the Nahanni Valley, but also apparently according to Lauren Coleman, in Michigan, as well as Alaska, and so really I'm sure I should know exactly which Native American nation it comes from, but I don't, unfortunately. And so, from what I can tell, it seems that the term Wahila has been used to describe large wolf-like creatures with kind of almost hyena-like shoulders. So very very top-heavy. So that definitely seems to be a kind of a recognized cryptid, so to speak.
And yet, if this was in Iowa, this would have been pretty far removed from where those are seen. Tom, when you said Canadian North, which North? The whole thing is North. The whole country is North.
Like the North,
like north Saskatchewan.
Yeah, so the north of Canada. So the Nahanni Valley, which is in which is in the Decno region of Fort Smith, I think. It's God knows, yeah. So basically, in the far north of Canada.
Okay.
So so again, this would be sorry.
Well, it is interesting. I've read a story, and this is from Nick Redfern, so grain of salt, about someone who was in the woods at night, and they saw, an anomalous dog, black dog. They saw it transform suddenly into a orb and fly away. And I don't want to say I've come to the conclusion, but I'm about 90% sure that the orbs are actually these things' default form. Before they assume any culturally predetermined shape to the recipient. I've also read a story from Nick Redfern where someone saw, I think this is actually on their front lawn at night. It was like a Men in Black type figure suddenly transform into a black dog and then walk away, and that's very creepy. So, Fernando, if your friends had stayed any longer, who knows what they would have eventually seen.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to ask, because so often this phenomena it can be tied to place. You can go your whole life without experiencing anything and then go to a place where it has influence and see or experience something strange. But more often than that, it's tied to person. And it's familial. That seems to be the case in your case, as it is in mine. Do you know if any of your friends who were present that night have had any other strange experiences like before then?
None that they told me about.
Okay, I think it would be interesting to ask, to know, although I'm not like pressuring you into doing that or something for our sake. We need more case files for the archives. No, that's not what we're doing here. So is that the end of your experiences?
Yeah, most of the major ones I can remember or think of, because everything else is just, just rumors. Like, apparently my workplace is haunted, but
Oh.
I never really experienced anything there. So, or anybody I know there had any experiences there. So,
Yeah, it's one of those like local rumors that
yeah,
just kind of festers for generations. That
yeah, because it used to be a speakeasy during the Prohibition era, and it's now a restaurant. So I'm guessing it must have stemmed from that.
Yeah, you're probably right, and that's another cliche you run into in paranormal lore is like speakeasies or saloons or whorehouses or other places of ill repute. It's always the ghosts of liquor runners and scofflaws and whores, and there's so many, like if you watch the old paranormal documentary shows from the 90s and the early 2000s, that there's so many of their cases are like that, that I almost, a disproportionate number of them, that I almost wonder if these really are human spirits, or if as Tom believes, if they are like a phenomenal construct and these are just stock characters it uses. It's kind of like a cliche that it over abuses, like an uncreative screenwriter. Tom, what's your position?
So again, I've kind of set my position on ghosts here, in that I think that there's probably a percentage of them which could be the spirits of the dead. And I think that obviously the kind of general rules for what makes a ghost seem to be a traumatic death, or like unfinished business, as the cliche goes.
Yeah.
And so places of ill repute, as you say, would likely spawn those sorts of deaths.
Yeah.
And so if we are taking the spirits of the dead angle here, it doesn't really surprise me that these sorts of places would be like particularly haunted. But also, to be honest, the sheer prevalence of such apparitions, I did not say entities there, does again suggest to me some degree of use of stock characters.
Yeah, especially because those places and the kind of people who frequent them, the kind of people who operate them, are of interest to historians. They're of interest to the average Joe. That's why they show up so frequently in literature, in film. And the phenomenon knows this. They know that those places are just havens, like hotbeds for good storytelling, and that could factor into its reasoning.
Yeah.
But it's interesting, in the town I grew up in, where I still live, the curling club of all places is reputed to be haunted. which is it's a building where they used to the sport of curling. Why a curling club? Why would anyone haunt a curling club? I don't know. Are they hearing those little discs, phantom discs being pushed on ice at night? I don't, you know. And the reason I say that is because it's very similar to, not entirely similar, but it's like Fernando's story about his workplace. It's like, uh, is it reputed? Yeah. Is it worth spending the night there with the proper equipment? No. Um. So Fernando, you're also a researcher, correct?
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't call myself like a full-blown researcher,
Mm-hmm.
but it just comes out of an interest I had out of just
Yeah.
like just anomalous phenomena, and yeah, because when I was younger, I used to have just an interest in like cryptozoology.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I remember back during the Mexican witch flap.
I
Around,
remember those. That was
yeah,
back in 2007, wasn't it?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
and I remember my mom was just I won't say she was freaking out, but she was I would say she was like scared, just because I remember seeing the footage, of the like the God, even all these years, like I want to say like witch for lack of a better term, just like floating across like this mountaintop.
Yeah.
And I remember just being amazed by that. And
Yeah. I remember hearing about that on Coast to Coast AM when it first broke. And I think I vaguely recall watching a video. There was a number of them floating around on the internet at
yeah.
the time.
Mm.
To the best of my knowledge, I do remember. Yeah, it was one where it actually looked like a classic cartoon witch, a classic stock character witch. You know, the hag with the big nose, the bump on the nose, the mottled skin, etc., on a broomstick. And
Mhm.
I didn't really know what to make of it at the time, but the whole thing passed so quickly, at least the way I remember it, that I didn't really. I don't know. There wasn't enough information came out about that flap, about that wave, for me to really look into it in depth. It
Mhm.
just kind of came and went. Tom, what was your perspective on that?
Oh, I remember. I think you and I probably saw a different video because I
Yeah.
remember. I remember the video as a kind of mountainous setting and seeing this thing. But I'm not going to say entity. I'm just going to say thing from now on.
Mhm.
But seeing this thing almost looking like a vaguely like a cauldron with somebody sitting in it or
Okay.
something. So like I describe it as much more UFO like than witch like, honestly. But yeah, because I remember seeing this thing moving across the screen basically. So moving from one end of the camera site to the other, and but I think that I've looked into kind of the details of this flap, and so you did have you had the police officer who had this entity basically come up to his car and like pound against the windshield or something. And then you had another police officer, I believe, who claimed to see two entities which looked like almost like Greek mythological harpies.
Yeah, yeah. If I remember correct, they were in a graveyard, just dancing
Yeah,
around, just cackling.
yeah, and so yeah, I remember I listened to a very very informative podcast about it from Into the Portal, which is a really great podcast series. So I'm just taking a moment to give them to recommend them, and so yeah, they talk about the witch flap as the Mexico City flying fiends better than I could. But yeah, in terms of these flying entities, I think that like flying humanoids are a specific manifestation of this sort of thing. So you get like entities like Mothman and the Chicago Batman and all of these sorts of things. But I'd say that witchcraft itself is something which I'm like actual magic as to whether or not it can work is something which I'm kind of on the fence about.
See, to me, the Mexican witch wave that was just so riddled with like familiar stock characters. Like a lot of 14s would interpret it as like an updating or a dusting off of sorts of age old archetypes, but to me it was just it was much more like the Hat Man or the Flannel Man. It was like the phenomena aping popular culture again.
Mm.
That's the way I perceived it at the time.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, but Fernando, your mother took it seriously.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, because she is more spiritual and religious. So, I guess the fact that they said it was like a witch. I guess she was more scared of that than just seeing this footage.
Oh, she believed that these were human magic users.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think that's what they were.
Yeah.
Personally, I'm not really afraid of magic, to be honest, because so much of the occult community is like pretentious and fraudulent, and I just don't. I used to follow their blogs and their YouTube channels, like Freider Barabbas and guys like that, and at the end of the day, it's just they're not hurling fireballs at me or sticking needles in dolls that look like me. I'm not afraid of that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that was in 2007. When did you start getting into it deeper?
I want to say, I guess the first like actual like when I actually went into this was like when I first started watching I want to what show was it? Monster Quest. Do you remember that show? It was on History, Monster Quest,
Yep.
and I was just so entrenched with that show when it was first airing. Just all these like different things that could be out there, and nowadays it's kind of hard to watch that show again just because it's like it's almost cheesy to watch it.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, and eventually I got a computer, and that's when I was really starting getting into it. Like this is where like I was able to find like all these like these websites dedicated to talking about like cryptids, UFOs, and just all this. And over time, I just started my interest started growing more and more, and eventually I started collecting books.
Mm-hmm.
And just
Which websites?
let's see. I know one of the first ones was Crypto Mundo.
Yes.
Yeah, I used to read that one.
There's another one. There's two, but I don't think they're up anymore. I think it was called what was it called? What was it called? I think it was called Alien Zoo, I think.
I never heard of that
Carl
one.
Schuker.
What was it?
You mean Carl Schuker's blog?
No, not his blog. God, it was definitely an older website. It had that old website feel to it. It was dedicated to cryptids, that's for sure. And I tried looking for it again a while back, but I think it's not up anymore. And
sorry, continue.
and the other websites that I don't remember the name of it anymore, and I know that's gone for sure, because that's where I first read about Mothman on that website, and that's just all these more it had more obscure cryptids.
Yeah.
And it had really unique artwork to go with it too.
Oh,
But
was the
Cryptos?
website called? Was the
that
website called?
I don't remember anymore. It's been years.
Because there's one cryptid site that has like archives, like just massive archives of obscure creatures, and each one has an accompanying photo or accompanying illustration, and the illustrations are always interesting. Cryptopia.us, American Monsters.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I discovered American Monsters in high school, but it's not that one. But yeah, but in high school, I did spend a lot of time reading those articles.
Again, the people behind that site now have another podcast, which I also listen to,
Yeah.
called the Kryptonite Podcast.
Yeah, I listen to that too.
Yeah, and I've actually I've talked to both Mark and Rob, and yeah, they are great guys. Go have a look. Go have a listen.
Mm-hmm.
I love how you're using our podcast as a forum to promote more popular podcasts.
I've only done that twice.
Yeah.
I plead not guilty.
I wasn't even aware that's what I was doing.
Yeah.
What
Me?
yeah, what books? What books did you start collecting?
Let's see. What do I have here? Some of the earlier ones were from John Keel.
Yes.
What do I have here? Our Haunted Planet. What's the other one? Strange Creatures from Space and from Time and Space.
Yep, I got that one when I was 18.
Yeah. Yeah, I have ones that are dedicated more to like cryptids and just, humanoids rather than like more abstract ideas.
Yeah.
And just over time I started collecting. More recently, I discovered Albert Rosales and his database.
Yep. I discovered, not to cut you off. Well, I guess I already did. But I discovered him online back in 2006 when I was just starting in this. Back when he had his his entire body of work available, like just to read for free on his website. He had a long list of all the years, all the centuries. You could click on any one and just scroll through. Unfortunately, you have to pay for the books now, but that was a golden era.
Yeah, I discovered him after he sold his books, so I wasn't able to have access to his material online.
Yeah.
Until I joined the Discord. So.
Yeah, can't blame him. If you have something you can profit from, why not monetize it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny in my own Keelianism. He was actually like one of the very first writers I ever took an interest in, because I saw his name in a generic encyclopedia on UFOs and related phenomena. And I read the brief description, and it just clicked with me for like no reason, just intuitively. And I've been a Keelian, an armchair Keelian, ever since. I remember I rented the Mothman Prophecies from the local library during the summer of 2006, and I read that nonstop, like at work, etc. It wasn't the original or one of the older reprints with the cool cover, though. It was the 2002 reprint, that came out for the film adaptation.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. And I remember that. And it's funny, as much as he's influenced me, I really only own one book by him, and that's Strange Creatures from Time and Space. I've read Our Haunted Planet. I've read The Eighth Tower. I've read Disneyland of the Gods, Operation Trojan Horse, all of that. And yet I've never actually owned them. I've always just read them for free on Bibliotheca Pleiades or just downloaded like bad PDF scans and read them on my computer. So I'm kind of I'm like a cheapskate Keelian. I'm a low effort Keelian.
Yeah. I own the Mothman Prophecies and Strange Creatures from Time and Space, and like, yeah, I think that's about it. I've read the others as audiobooks.
Mm-hmm.
Do you own anything by Brad Steiger?
Me?
Both.
Let me see. I don't think so. What books has he wrote?
He wrote for like 50 years, and he wrote prolifically during that time. So, like more than I could name. But towards the end of his life, and he started writing or compiling, and these are what you're going to encounter most frequently in bookstores. Like compilations of stories with particular themes, and it's always like a 3-item title, like real ghosts, real hauntings, and restless spirits, or real vampires, real monsters, and aliens or vampires from space, or things like titles like that. I actually appeared. I'm actually featured prominently in his very last book. Under different, he kind of like altered the spelling of my name for each one to make it read like it was different people, which is amusing. And he never did give me the free copy he promised me, but it's too late now.
Yep.
But no, I mean, yeah, he wasn't. I'm not going to say he wasn't a serious researcher, because he was sincere and he did a lot of work compiling stories. But he's not. He was never on the level of a Keel or a Jacques Vallée.
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't much of a. Sorry, continue.
He was. I don't know. There's more depth to his writing than there is to, say, Nick Redfern.
Well, yeah.
But
yeah,
if you own anything by him, it's most likely one of those 3-item title books. They're like big soft cover encyclopedias. Encyclopedia girth.
I've got Real Monsters, Gruesome Critters, and Beasts from the Dark Side. I've got I've got Shadow World. I've got Revelation, the Divine Fire.
Mm-hmm.
I think I have a few more as well, hidden somewhere on my shelves. I have almost all of them. A lot of them as ebooks.
Yeah. And I have to give him credit for this. He introduced the concept of spirit mimics, of strange figures of unknown origin who attempt to imitate living people, their physical appearance, the sound of their voice, etc. They will appear to and attempt to interact with people that the people they're imitating know, their friends and their family. And that's a genre, I guess you could call it, that it's always fascinated by me, or has always fascinated me, and yet I've never been able to find much on it apart from the stuff in his books. It's not as common, it's not as widespread as shadow people, as alien abductions, as this or that. And so there's less really to draw on. There's less to read, there's less to research to begin with. But I don't know, I have to give him credit for naming and documenting that little sub-phenomenon. And I'd wish that more would come out about it. I wish there was more research done on it.
Yeah. I mean, there are plenty of stories of kind of doppelgangers.
Yeah.
And though a doppelganger normally seems to be something much more connected to a person as opposed to trying to mimic that person.
Yeah, a doppelganger does not appear to your friends or family. They just appear to you.
Yeah.
And they don't interact. They just kind of look at you.
Yeah. There is a rather interesting, actually, I would say a rather horrifying story, which I read about in one of the Hilary Evans books. I think it was Visions, Apparitions, and Alien Visitors.
Yep, I own that one.
Yeah, there's a rather horrifying story in that one of a doppelganger that basically just continually stalked and mocked this person until he committed suicide, which is really horrible.
And it is, and to think it accomplished that without the use of social media.
It's just like, yeah, it's just so.
See, it's stories like that are why I don't believe this is a singular intelligence. I do believe it's an ecosystem.
Yeah.
Because different motivations.
Yes.
Different figures, different things display what seem to be different motivations, and they behave differently. And there's no tricksterism there. You know what I mean? It's just direct aggression.
Yeah. It's just provoking misery, just seemingly for the sake of provoking misery. And though, I mean, obviously, my main problem with the kind of literally Fortean, as in from Charles Fort, cosmic trickster hypothesis, or cosmic joker, I believe he referred to it as, the kind of cosmic joker hypothesis, which he made in to defend him, he made it semi-seriously. But my main problem with the cosmic joker hypothesis is that it's completely unfalsifiable.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's like with that story, I could argue that that's a manifestation of the cosmic trickster, because what's it doing? It's making a story. Just like, so it basically just, because this thing would presumably be very detached from human life, it just made a story out of this guy.
It blends everything together in a way that causes dismissal. Because if you have that easy go-to one-purpose explanation for everything, well, that discourages any further
investigation almost.
Yes. Yeah, and I have to tell you, I've always found the cosmic trickster hypothesis as a whole underwhelming, because it assumes that this thing's only motivation is to play tricks on us for its own amusement. Now, there are many cases where that obviously seems to be the case. Or if it doesn't actively seem like that's the case, we can't really think of any other easy explanation.
Mm-hmm.
But there are also many that aren't. And there's evidence that this phenomena, or various intelligences within this phenomena, are active in our world in a much more profound way.
Yes.
Shaping history, shaping culture, shaping technology in ways that are anything but amusing.
Yes.
Yeah, so I've never really bought into the cosmic trickster theory. Fernando, what's your take on that?
I mean, I haven't done too much research into the cosmic trickster theory or idea, so I'm entirely familiar with it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm when it comes to like my interests in just in this area of research, I'm very specific. There's some areas I don't really go into just because I don't have much of an interest in.
Okay, well, what interests you and what doesn't?
Mainly I stick to, let's see, cryptozoology, humanoids, euphonauts, it's anything that's surrounding that. So I don't really I don't dabble too much into the occult, or like, let's see.
Kind of. So like a story. So like ghost stories wouldn't necessarily be your area.
No.
Not really mine either. I don't know. I personally, I've always preferred high strangeness cases. I've always preferred the weirder end of UFO phenomena, the stuff that Keel used to dig up. I've never really been big on like mainstream paranormal stuff, ghosts and demonic possession and this and that. I have been into poltergeist. That's the one exception.
Yes.
Because poltergeist phenomena dovetails to a large degree with a lot of other things.
Yes, it does.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, high strangeness. I don't know. That's the word I was looking for. Even with like cryptids and aliens, I try not to stick too much to like the mainstream areas of that. Like Bigfoot or Mothman. But nowadays I try to find and some of the weirder ones.
Yeah.
Well, like by weirder ones, define weirder ones, because you could argue that Mothman is a weirder one. But he's
I mean, and I guess it just depends on the person. But I heard so much about Mothman for so many years that it's kind of just eh.
I agree. I burnt myself out on Mothman.
Yeah.
Truth be told, it's like all that has been said about that case has been said. All that's been made has been made. It's like, if you've read the book and if you've seen the documentary Eyes of the Mothman, which I recommend, then you don't really need to read or watch anything else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the same thing with like Gray encounters. It's kind of like I've heard so much about that a specific type of like humanoid or ET or whatever you want to describe it. That it's kind of just eh.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like for
another
me,
gray encounter.
Growing up in the 90s, when thanks to the X-Files, gray aliens were everywhere in pop culture. They were on T-shirts, on posters, on bumper stickers. You could buy gray alien bobbleheads. Gray alien this, gray alien that. Gray aliens on cheesy made-for-TV movies, on cheesy made-for-TV abduction documentaries, and so on and so on. It's like, it doesn't really interest me anymore. It can't possibly interest me. Ufology, or I shouldn't say ufology, because we're talking about UFO knots rather than crafts. UFO knot research was so much more interesting in like the 50s, 60s, and 70s.
Oh yeah.
You had this wide array of bizarre shapes. You had the Space Brothers.
The 70s were a wild year.
Yeah, the Space Brothers.
Decade, as you say.
The Nordics, the things that look like plants or fruits or vegetables, things that look like robots, hairy dwarfs.
Or pyramids, to bring it right back to the start.
Yeah. Talk about a perfect circle, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Indeed. And it's worth noting, though, that the Greys are only predominant really in North American abductions, North American sightings. In European and in Central and South American research, there's still a wider variety. Like hairy dwarves are still in vogue in South America. Hairy dwarves are still popular. Nordics are still popular in Europe. And when I'm saying popular, I don't mean pop culture popular. I mean kind of a sarcastic way of saying, hey, still commonly reported.
Yeah.
And I think that the reason for that is that the phenomena bases its form on expectations. And Whitley Strieber's Communion is known mainly in the English-speaking world.
Yeah.
The images that he immortalized, he immortalized primarily within the Anglophone world. And so naturally, the phenomenon melded itself to that. But in other parts of the world where he was not so influential, things kind of remained as they were earlier on in the century. I may be completely wrong about that.
I think that greys are still are not uncommon around the world, but they're certainly less common than they are in North America.
Yeah. So I was partly wrong about that.
Partly wrong about that, but it's not like there'll never be any like European grey encounters. So I know of some from Britain, for example. But I would definitely say that like Nordics and such entities, and I said entities again, Nordics and such things, are still reported over here.
Yeah.
And I seem to remember that when I was talking to Albert Rosales earlier this year, actually, and one of the first encounters from 2020 was a South American landing case where the witness saw, I believe it was 3 or 4 Nordics. And so it's like they're still clearly out there, so to speak.
Yeah.
But they've just, in terms of the pop culture and kind of the universal, the kind of collective unconscious. Thanks to Whitley Strieber and the X-Files and all of that, they have. If you think of Alien, people will very much normally describe bug-eyed, even if these things are green and bug-eyed, it's always the grey. It's often the grey kind of body type.
Well, in many ways, the gray is just kind of a continuation of 1950s B-movie aliens.
Yeah.
Little green men with big eyes.
Yes.
Well, little green men, their skin turned gray, and they started wearing shades. It's not really, they're not really that original. The angular features are development. Because it used to be little green men were always portrayed as kind of round, doughy featured, but both of them, to a large degree, are continuations of earlier Fae lore, Fae descriptions. They're both small, spindly, kind of weird when it comes to their gender,
Yes.
kind of either androgynous or genderless altogether.
One of the I know of some like very much earlier grey encounters. There was one which I heard brief mention of from the 1920s.
Mm-hmm.
And that entity was identified as a fairy.
Okay.
And so it's like, I seem to remember that it was basically a bedroom invader grey.
Yeah, I've heard those stories before. Greys as bedroom invaders, where they just kind of stand there, they just appear in your bedroom and watching you.
Yeah, this thing basically just did that, and it was described as a fairy. So that encounter is in one of my one of the kind of fairy encounters books that I own from like the mid 20th century.
Okay, now both of you guys, what are your favorite cryptids? Like the ones that have fascinated you the most for the longest time?
Let's see. I guess I would say, I guess just in general, atmospheric, like beasts, like the flying rays, the jellyfish.
Yeah, I'd say that for me, it's kind of whenever anybody used to ask my favorite cryptid, I would always say the Ningen from Japan, these so-called Antarctic humanoids.
Mm-hmm.
But I've recently decided that I'm not going to count those anymore because they are demonstrably a creepypasta.
Yeah, although they would make an excellent theme for a short story.
Oh yeah,
or a movie.
definitely.
Can you imagine being in a submarine?
Oh yeah,
out there down in the depths, and you see this giant white thing like suddenly dominating the side, like the window.
Yeah, that'd be an awesome sight in the truest sense of the word. But yeah, I think that I'd now say that my favorite cryptid is kind of between the realm of cryptozoology, between the realms of cryptozoology and the paranormal, and I would say little folk.
Okay.
The little
Fernando,
folk.
why why um why atmospheric creatures for you, and Tom, why little folk?
Mhm.
It's, I'd say just uh, honestly, I don't really know. It's just one of the more unique ones that I come across. You don't they're not as common compared to other cryptid cases, and I just find them pretty unique.
Yeah, I get that.
Yeah, the one that
In term,
always the
sorry, continue.
one that always stood out to me was the roly poly or the tar
The
baby from the night
oh yes,
the early '60s in Kentucky. I've never
yes.
heard of anything else even remotely like.
Hmm.
Going for oh wow. If we're going for like individual cases, so
Yeah.
not necessarily kind of more well-known cryptids. So individual cases, again, this one is included in a lot of like collections of cryptids, but I would argue it's not a cryptid. My favorite case out of anything by far ever is Jeff the Mongoose.
Yeah, yeah, because it's again, it's so unique.
It's it's kind of it's obviously a poltergeist. It's obviously like the poltergeist voices thing, but just the way he describes himself and his personality and all of that, it's just hilarious. I just it's just it Jeff the Mongoose is the true cosmic trickster.
Hmm.
It's brilliant. Yeah, I have the book and I have the book. Love the Lemon Demon song, and it's yeah, it's my favorite case of all time, the Dalby Spook.
Hmm.
And so, Michael, your favorite case would be the Roly Poly.
I wouldn't say it's my favorite. It's the most frustrating. That's the thing in this field. You have to get used to frustration because you're going to encounter so many individual cases that may catch your eye, that may pique your interest, that you're not really going to learn much about,
Hmm.
Yeah.
no
Some are
matter how
just
badly you want to.
Mm-hmm.
That brief encyclopedia entry you read online or you read in your one of your books, that's pretty much all there has been said about it. That's all
mhm.
you're gonna find about it.
Yeah, the one-offs.
Yeah, I hate
Yeah.
I hate that. I for favorite cryptids, man. Oh, God. I do like the abominable swamp slob
Yes.
because they combine aspects of different phenomena. They have a Bigfoot-like appearance. They have an overt connection to UFOs. They have the glowing eyes, this strange aggressive behavior. We don't really know what they are, and for that reason alone, they stand out to me.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd say for me, just in general, outside of cryptids, I would say either the cosmic vehicles or
Mm-hmm.
the jetpack people.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. The jetpack people are interesting to me because it's like there's a chance they could actually be mundane.
Yeah.
That they could actually be humans with access to as yet undiscovered or as yet not widely known technology.
Yeah, especially what's going on over at Blacks.
That they could just be testing out.
Yeah. Um. Then again, there is a case from Falls City in Nebraska, which which took place in 1956, and basically a 9 foot tall, skeletal, emaciated monstrosity wearing what appeared to be a metallic a metallic jetpack with almost like with metal wings basically descended down in front of this person and then just vanished back up into the sky. So basically, just kind of dropped down, scared the shit out of this person, and then left. And it was it's a bizarre case documented by Ken Gerhard, and so I've reached out to him and asked him for more information, but I don't think I've got a reply as of yet. So I think that some of the cases could be mundane, but some of them are definitely not.
Yeah, my favorite one would be the one from Gorky, Russia, from 1978. Mostly because of how much I had to do to get the sketch related to that case.
You have the sketch?
Yeah.
Could you show it?
Let me see. Can I do that through here?
You don't have to here now necessarily, but
yeah, but just
eventually.
Back on the group, and then we'll use it as the cover for this episode.
Yeah. So I first heard about this case on Phantoms and Monsters, and just not only is it because of the Jetpack people, just because of the sketch, just really wanted to have a way to have it in my database, and I first tried messaging Lon Strickler to see if he would have it. I never got a response from him. I messaged a bunch of other people to see if they would if they knew a source for it. They didn't know either. I then ordered Albert Rosales' book, of the one from 1975 to 1979, and the case is in there, but the sketch isn't. So then I had to find a way to message Mikhail Gerstein, and I messaged the what was it called, the AFU, what was it, the Archives for the Unexplained. I messaged them first, and they didn't know where it was from specifically, but then they got in touch with Gerstein, and he was able to give me a copy of the sketch. And this was over the course of like 3 months trying to find this sketch. So yeah,
Wow.
I'm just really glad I have that sketch now. Though apparently there is more, because it is part of an archive related to various cases during the Soviet Union.
Yeah. A similar experience I had with was actually with the pyramid case that I was talking about earlier today, or earlier this show. Was so basically it was described ages ago on the Cryptopia website, which we were talking about earlier, and but in that it was just described as a pyramid, like a pyramid with crab claws, basically. And then I basically started, I realized that the article written by Rob Morphy, who, again, okay, I'm going to stop plugging out the shows, but so in the article written by Rob Morphy, it provides the name of a Flying Saucer Review issue, and so then I find this Flying Saucer Review issue online, which is now in my personal archives, basically, and then I'm able to discover that the author of that article has written several other articles about that case, and turns out it's a full blown flap, including basically focusing around two families, and both of which were stalked by UFOs for quite a while, and the Pool Pyramid was the only entity that appeared in that case, but like there are photographs even of the UFOs seen by these people, and they are quite impressive photos. And so, yeah, and also that's the only way I managed to kind of realize that this thing was not a straight pyramid, and was actually like a much more angular looking kind of jaggedy disco creature. And yeah, I do enjoy a good rabbit hole. about you, Michael? Do you have any stories of hunting for cases? Okay. Anyways, not quite sure what's happened there, but yeah. So, is there anything else you would like to talk about, Fernando?
Oh yeah, the database. That's what I forgot.
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm guessing you two already know,
Oh, yeah.
but just for anybody who's listening later on. So basically, about I want to say like a year ago, I started putting together a collection of various drawings, sketches, artwork, just related to various anomalous phenomena, whether it's like extraterrestrial encounters, humanoids, cryptids, and originally it was just gonna be ETs, but over time I came across other sketches that I decided to expand it, and
Yeah.
and now I have it split up into six categories. Mystery airships,
Yep.
alien encounters, humanoid beings, cryptids, photographs, and the plain weird.
Yeah. My favorite category.
Yeah, yeah, that's the one where I can't really put it in one specific category just because it's so weird. So
Miscellaneous.
yeah.
If anyone's wondering where I went, it's a mystery. No,
Hey.
I went to go actually microwave my lunch because I have not eaten all day. We've been at this for over an hour.
Okay.
Let me ask you this: these illustrations, these are by witnesses?
Uh, Depends. Yeah, some are directly from my witness. Some are artist interpretation. Some are just just artwork related to those cases.
Okay, because I know there is a field of like Fortean art, like Richard Pusitano, who used to do work for Steiger's books. A lot of which is really cool, but it's not the same as an eyewitness drawing.
Yeah.
I remember the drawings from the Andreasen saga. I'm not sure if she drew these herself or if they were drawn by an artist commissioned by what's his name, by Fowler, or who. But those illustrations used to really haunt me as a teenager. I hadn't even like read the books themselves. I didn't even know the stories, the events that they were depicting, but the images in themselves really, really kind of got to me, really haunted me.
Hmm.
I think that the Andreasen case is actually something which I was going to bring up earlier, but I can't remember exactly why. Um, it was about like the expectation, about like what people expect,
Mm-hmm.
and how that affects how the phenomenon appears. So Andreasen, originally at least, regarded the greys that appeared to her as angels, which kind of goes against the expectation rule, because it's like, if she was clearly expecting angels from a paranormal experience, which she obviously was, then you'd have thought that the entities would have appeared as angels, but instead they just appeared as grey aliens. And I mean, angelic entities are involved later in that case, where like you do end up with like very tall, like kind of robed figures covered in like divine light and all of that. But originally it was very much just greys in spacesuits, basically, and she still called them angels, which is really interesting to me because it does seem as if there is like an exception to every single rule in the Fortean field, which makes it very difficult to nail anything down.
Hmm.
Um, Michael, what do you think? Okay, I am once again steering the ship by myself. So Fernando, I wanted to ask you this. I mean, I know the answer to this, but I doubt our listeners will. When you describe jetpack people, and what was the other one?
Cosmic vehicles or cosmic cars. Goes back and
jetpack
forth.
people and cosmic cars. What are they? Describe them to me.
Both are just I guess for cosmic cars, I'd say, again, these cases are just so weird that even Albert Rosales has a hard time categorizing them. But I guess the most simplified thing is that they resemble Earth vehicles, or they're like pseudo vehicles, but there's always something off about them, whether it's like the vehicle itself or their occupants. So like some of these cases are like where like the cars are floating, some of them have no wheels, some of them are like where like the vehicle itself is like just disappears in a crowd of like, all these cars with a blink of an eye, or like the occupants themselves are like, I guess can be described as UFOnauts, even though I don't know if you can categorize them as UFOs. And
I mean, they're more UDOs, aren't they?
yeah,
Unidentified driving objects.
yeah, but they're not really common, or at least I don't really come across them too much.
Yeah, they're definitely less common than UFOs and USOs.
Has there ever been one where it's like a completely normal-looking car, let's like say an AMC Pacer, that just happens to have, say, a gray alien or something else recognizably 40 in it? Just a weird juxtaposition like that?
I don't think so. From what I read, a lot of the occupants are almost like they're not described as Nordic, but they resemble Nordics, I would say.
Okay. Linda Godfrey actually has a case from Orange County, California, which is basically a dog man dressed in a fancy suit in the back of a Cadillac, which is really bizarre. And I think she called it the Orange County Luxury Werewolf.
Yeah,
and,
yeah. That's one thing I'd also notice is that somebody's involved black Cadillacs for some reason.
That's something Keel noted as well.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting you mentioned the werewolf in a suit, because as Cutchin and Renner have pointed out, Bigfoot is also not commonly, but has been seen in human clothing.
Yes.
And that's I have no idea what the point of that would be. Could we look at it from a valet-esque perspective and see it as some sort of symbolism, or could we just see it as tricksterism run amok? What would it be?
It's really difficult to categorize it. I see it as some kind of vague symbolism, honestly, about I don't know. I think with the Bigfoot encounters, it's clearly trying to I think that it's trying to draw attention to something or other. I think it's drawing attention to something about humans and their past to some degree, because I think that Bigfoot, it's definitely or nowadays at least, it's often recognized as kind of a throwback to the kind of ape-man era.
Yeah.
And so I think that having a Bigfoot wearing clothes could imply something or other, something philosophical about human nature or something. But realistically, who knows? When it comes down to it, it's an ape-man in clothes, and we don't know why. And we don't know why there's even an ape-man there.
Mm-hmm.
But there is, or there seems to be. And to be honest, this may seem like a bit of a heel turn, but who are we to ascribe some philosophical meaning to it? I think that it's like we can guess all we want, but we're not able to say, well, this represents this specific archetype explored by this philosopher. We don't know.
Well, I was implicitly arguing against ascribing any philosophical depth to it.
Yes.
It could just be it could just be a whim. And we could look like complete idiots trying to figure out the esoteric significance of Bigfoot and a tutu.
Agreed.
In fact, we do. We've been there before. We've hit that low before, and we've sounded like idiots.
Yep. I mean, to be honest, in this field, if you don't sound like an idiot every now and then, you're not really having fun, are you?
No, you're not making any progress either. And that's one of the things that's so rewarding about Forteana is that, it really does challenge dichotomies. What is to be taken seriously, what is not. Yes. What should we spend our time considering, and what should we just dismiss? See, with this stuff, those dichotomies do not exist. Or if they do, you don't know where they exist. You don't really know how to distinguish what's worth your time and what's not, so you're kind of passively forced
to investigate almost everything.
And it breaks down. It does break. God, I just realized something. Valet said that one of the aims of the phenomena could be to break down traditionally structured ways of thinking. Like the question, what is the sound of one hand clapping? Could I have just spontaneously stumbled across what he meant there? The same as A.P. Strange said when he was assessing the work of like Christopher Knowles and others. He said, maybe you don't take all of his theories seriously, but in drawing those connections and in finding those parallels, he does your mind a service, and it gets it thinking in ways it wouldn't before, in patterns it wouldn't have before, while breaking down old patterns. And once that's been accomplished, that has all kinds of applications.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah. I'm that talk earlier when we were discussing the Russian jetpack man, that got me thinking to my own flying. I'm not going to call it a flying humanoid because it wasn't very human-like, but my cousin and I in our own flying thing sighting. Mm-hmm. It was odd, and I know I've described this to you in the past, but I'd like to describe it out here too to see if any listener could shed some insights. It looked two-dimensional. It did not look like a real thing. It looked like a cartoon juxtaposed onto our three-dimensional reality. If you've ever seen movies like Cool World or Who Framed Roger Rabbit, it was like that. Because it did not appear solid either. It appeared like it had the surface texture of a cartoon, like it was drawn with black pencil, like an old Edward Gorey illustration or something. And it was odd how when it moved, it didn't really flap its wings. It kind of stroked with them, like it was swimming through the air, like it was pushing air away from it, the way a swimmer pushes water away from him. And you really can't call that flying. Like, I have no insight into that at all.
It honestly, the thing that it reminds me of is stories from, I believe it was the 16th century of the pilot or the sailors in these sky ships swimming down to retrieve their anchors. And it reminds me of it also reminds me of like the kind of euphanaut kind of spacewalk. Mm-hmm. And the very and then obviously moving from that, it then makes me think about Paracelsus's elementals.
Yeah.
The way he described them as moving through their respective elements as easily as humans move through air, and
Yeah.
So like the gnomes, for example, are able to walk through solid rock, and like the sylphs are associated with I seem to remember reading a description of them as tall and swarthy humanoids who are able to move through air almost. I think they are able to move through air like water, which is pretty much exactly the description of the movement of your Mothman. Also,
Yeah.
I would just quickly like to make a Jessica Rabbit joke and say that it wasn't Mothman, it was just drawn that way.
Yeah, and that's really what stood out to me more so than its movements was its texture, its consistency. It looked like a black pencil illustration had leapt off the page into the air and become animated. And so it did contrast very starkly with the natural surroundings around it.
Yeah.
And like I said, I've never heard of anything like that in Fortiana in all my research of an entity that looked like a literal cartoon.
I've heard of plenty of cartoon entities. The Black Stickmen spring to mind. And like there was a case I read about online where someone saw what appeared to be like a mural of a white tiger on their wall, and this thing moved around like it was a tiger, but on the 2D surface.
Okay.
And so like these two-dimensional terrors. They definitely seem they're uncommon, but they're not non-existent, so to speak.
Yeah, and it could be that those could like be prototypes. That those could be unfinished or incomplete versions of
other entities.
Yeah. And that I wish we had stayed. I wish we had just parked and watched it as long as we could. I wish I had gotten my phone out and tried to take a photograph or try to record. Yeah. I mean, it would probably get shot down by Sketch Line within a minute, but
you know.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring up the stick people because I remember several years ago, though, they looked like they were going to be the next big thing in the paranormal circles, the way the Hat Man was in the early 2000s. There was a number of sightings, there was a number of articles, but they never really took off. And now,
they just lurk on the fringes.
Yeah, I would like to interview at some point someone who knows more about them. Fernando, what do you have on the Stickman? Because that's another one of those things that just frustrates me.
Yeah, I haven't really come across any of them more recent. Yeah, a lot of them that I have read were from like, let's see, like from somewhere from around like the mid 2000s to the early 2010s. After that, I haven't really come across a lot.
Yeah,
mid 2000s.
But there is one that I have that is from 1969 that is described as being Black Stickman.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting.
That Beyond Creepy talked about in one of his videos.
Did you just shill another channel?
I might have.
Oh dear.
We should just start having like product placements at this point.
Yeah, just straight up product placement at this point. Just like
drink Folger's coffee and listen to Radio Free Magonia.
Yep, the only way to truly enjoy the other side.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I haven't heard. Yeah, I've only heard of two-dimensional beings from the Black Stickmen, but I have heard of like cartoon characters or cartoonish beings being seen.
Mm-hmm.
There's a couple cases of like characters from like Sesame Street being seen, Muppets.
Yeah, we were just discussing those cases recently.
Yeah. There's a couple others. There's one that involves Alice in Wonderland.
Mm-hmm.
One that I think one is one where where a person saw Spider-Man, but I think that's more of like more of like a ghost encounter more than anything from whatever.
Yeah, Spider-Man's ghost.
Yeah.
That's one of the ones which I covered on the early days of my blog.
Yeah.
Basically the story goes that in this neighborhood a young kid wearing a Spider-Man costume, who is very much fixated on his Spider-Man costume, he got hit by a car, and then sightings started of effectively Spider-Man, literally like crawling over walls and all sorts of things like that. And the main witness describes when she was a child seeing this figure dressed as Spider-Man, crawling up a wall to look at her from the other side of the wall, and she described its movements as being like a snake, which is just really unsettling. And so yeah, it's like in those sorts of cases where a ghost appears of someone who would not be out to threaten people. When a ghost appears as something quite clearly unsettling, it's like, do you believe that is the spirit of a dead child, or do you believe that is something using that child's image?
Yeah, because a lot of these cases are like with like what involves something like this, or like their cartoon characters where like they try to act like normal or try to appeal to like these people, or like a lot of these involve kids. They try to appeal to these kids, but there's always something off about them.
I remember there was a case where an entity manifested as a Fozzie Bear.
Yeah,
But with these big black eyes.
Yeah.
And it's like it's just really eerie.
Yeah. So it makes me wonder if it's like whatever these things are, it could be like, what if it's like using these characters as a way to like try to appeal to those kids, or like so like you get closer to them.
Something which Michael noticed in his research is that these things seem to need permission to interact, or on some level, and so using a cartoon character to effectively dupe a child into allowing this thing into their lives is it's screwed up, but it seems to be something which this phenomenon tries. And I remember to bring it back to the X-Files, I remember there was actually an episode in one of the recent seasons where they basically kind of did a kind of vague adaptation of this, where they had a demonic familiar, that's what they identified it as, using the images of cartoon characters to basically lure children into the woods. Which was one of the better episodes of the more recent X-Files season. But yeah, and so I think that unless Michael is here, I think that it's probably my first time like winding this show down. I think unless you have anything else to say.
I think that is it.
All right then.
Oop, hello.
Hey Tom.
Hi.
Hey Fernando. This has been tonight's episode of Radio Free Magonia, the official podcast of the Magonian Research Group. As always, I'm your host, Michael Parrish, and...
hi, I'm Tom Goodwin, or goodbye, I'm Tom Goodwin.
Yep. And we would like to thank our guest tonight, Fernando, for appearing, for taking time out of his schedule to do this.
Yeah, it was fun.
We hope you enjoyed listening, and we hope you listen again. Take it easy.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Bye.
Good night.
Bye.